this is Caesaris, Commentarii de Bello Gallico, Book 1, Chapter 3, and the final verses. Now we have a couple formatting changes here, so let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we see is, within this statement, is a per facile, a adverb that means very easy, not in their traditional comparative adverb form, very useful to note. And then we have this factu esse, and this factu is in the supine ablative form. And this is almost like a verb of context, thinking about, well, for the doing, and with being, it's like it is for the doing. So it's almost like saying it was very easy for the doing. But we look at this infinitive, and there's more to be said about this statement. So to these, or by these, depending on the meaning, probat. We have this singular third person ending here. And let's stop and think about the context. So last time we were talking about how Argetorix was convincing all these people by doing different things, sending out an embassy and giving his daughter in marriage to convince fellow leaders to join his cause, that he bewails the size of the territory, and he's trying to get them really to join his plan because he wants to control a lot of people and be the king of all Gaul. And we can see this is kind of the execution of his plan. If we took it probat, which is our main verb, you can see that he proves that, and looking beyond, we have conata per ficere, and I like to point out this a ending, and right here is going to be the plural neuter accusative, that it is very easy for the doing. It is very easy to do, in other words, the things having been attempted, or even to use this as a nominative gerund, it is very easy to finish those things having been attempted. So we have, he proves to those, talking about the people that he attempted to persuade in the last little bit, proves to those that it is very easy in the doing to finish or complete. And I'll put these things having been attempted, really to bring out the fact that he's been talking about these things in conversation. These things are, he's pointing kind of back to these things, where the author is, and it's these things having been attempted. And to the speakers of Latin, it would be obvious of the demonstrative nature of this word on its own without any sort of noun. And I think that it's important in English to highlight that by using these. And going back to in the doing, it sounds a little awkward, but it's very easy to do, to complete. The double infinitive, I think it sounds even more awkward, but that might just be personal opinion. So he proves to those that it's very easy in the doing to complete these things having been attempted. So he's showing them that they can do it, really trying to persuade them that all you have to do is it's really easy, just do a few things. And now he's going to explain this statement. And by now we're familiar with Caesar's kind of double emphasis with two words of what really just is because, therefore and because together, and really just means because. And then we have this intensive pronoun, himself, and because we don't usually have the head pronoun or just the nominative subjective pronoun, it's kind of just like saying, well, yeah, he himself, because he is going to be the subject here also, is he himself of his own civilization, power, and then we have this obtenturus. And note this is a more unusual form. We have the subjunctive imperative or imperfect along with this you are added on to the fourth principal part of obtenio, which is like saying hold or occupy, or maybe even seize, because he himself should or might have. And once again, no good translation there for the imperfect subjunctive. Might have been about to, noting this you are here, future participle, about to seize. And we have imperiums or direct object, and finally this genitive phrase of his own state. Power, and we'll just, instead of saying of, we'll say over. Over his own state or citizenry. I guess we'll just put that for good measure. And he's really just a kind of first step in explaining this, talking about how the position that he's in, he's about to take power, so it's going to be pretty easy to do what he wants. So it's kind of the point that he's building up to here. And we have an indirect statement right off the bat here. We can see this non esse dubium, and I'm thinking that there is no doubt. And we have with this quin, I'm beginning to think maybe we have a little bit of a question phrase in here. And totius Gallii, holy of Gaul, great, Helvetii, and with the subjunctive verb at the end here, yep, it's an indirect question. So there's no doubt why, and with this nt ending here and the nominative plural, the Helvetii, we have no doubt why the Helvetians should not hold great power. And with this plurimum and the possent, we can assume we're talking less about the just basic ability that a party has, but rather their sway or their power. When you see posse with plurimum or another sort of this adjective like major or magnum. And of course, it's useful to remember that posse itself is derived from to be, powerful, and that's why we have the pot prefix on it. Hold great power, and then we have with this totius Gallii, over Gaul, and it's the country because it's singular, and because we have the extra I and the feminine ending. So very important to distinguish between the people and the place. Hold great power over Gaul, should not. And then for totius, just put wholly, maybe totally. And we have se, reflexive pronoun, and we have suis copiis, by or for their own abundances. And with this o, we can pretty much assume that these are all ablative, because it has this very similar construction with both these pronouns here, ownership pronouns, and then we have very similar constructions with talking very similar context of vocabulary with abundances and army. So by their own abundances and by his own force or army. And then we have Elise again, and we'll have to decide whether that's going to be ablative or dative. Can't have more than one ablative within, a statement, so it can get confusing in that way. Regna, and that's going to probably be a neuter accusative plural. And then we have conciliatorum, which is another one of these future participles, future active participles. And we have our main verb finally, confirmat. So that's going to be where we start. That. And then we can assume that with this reflexive pronoun, which is often found in indirect statements, and this participle without a linking verb on the end of it, we can just shadow that in, assume there's one there. And that gives us a nice indirect statement to parse along with this confirmat. He confirms that they or he, this we know that it's talking about him, even though as the subject, of course, accusative is the subject of an indirect statement, that he is about to gain or perhaps accomplish kingships or domains by their own abundances or people's abundances of people perhaps, or armies or force abundances, and by his own army. So reviewing this a little bit, we have this whole kind of sentence. We have because he has this information, he's able to assure these people, the other leaders and people he's trying to get to join him, that he can really just take power quickly. He's in a perfect position to do it. He's ready to seize power. Their Helvetians can do it because he is about to use their armies and whatnot to actually take over Gaul. So he's, because of this kind of insider trading almost information, because he knows all about the operation, he's the one that can reap the benefits of it, and he's able to say, yeah, this is going to happen. So with that, let's continue. So right off the bat, we have this ablative right here by this speech. Would say ablative absolute, but of course this is not in the correct case. So it's almost like an earlier phrase where we have led along or moved, perhaps, but we'll just say led along. So led along, referring back to the people he's talking to, the council, or perhaps just the meetings he's been having with these people that are influential leaders of other citizenries within the realm of the Helvetians, obviously. So led along by this speech. And then we have inter se, amongst themselves or among themselves. We have fidem, the direct object, and use, another direct object, and it's being modified by this gerundive, usurandum. And then we have dot, our main verb. So faith and oaths, an oath to be sworn upon, which is a pact, and another way to say like treaty or agreement. So led along by this speech, they give they give their trust among themselves and an oath to be sworn upon. So they're giving each other, they're basically making pacts and really just manifesting their trust of what Ergeterix is saying, and he knows what he's talking about because of this stuff and these ideas right here. He knows what's going to happen, and he's able to say this with great confidence. So they give their trust amongst themselves and an oath to be sworn upon, and they're kind of these conspirators getting together all behind Ergeterix's plan to unify their forces and ultimately take power. Oath to be sworn upon. And I'll put just a comma there to improve the English grammar side of things. And they're just committing their thoughts to actions and giving Ergeterix literal control over a great part of the population that didn't have control over previously. And then simply we have and. Simply a confirmation of this deed with regno occupato, an ablative absolute, with the kingship seized through, and in some ways, in some cases, pair can mean by or on even, by or with even, with the three what? We have potentissimos, firmissimos, populos, and this is going to be the strongest and, or the most powerful and strongest and also strongest peoples, with three strongest and also, I keep switching those around somehow, most powerful and also three most powerful and also strongest peoples. And finally, we're kind of out of this ablative absolute and its prepositional phrase that directly follows it. They hope that, with the sperant back here, and we have once again this totius Gallii and sese potiri pose. I'm really seeing the indirect statement once again. So hope that they themselves, really giving some emphasis with the sese reduplication there. They themselves are able to obtain Gaul, obtain really power, obtain the whole of Gaul. And going back to this prepositional phrase, though it directly follows this ablative absolute, it almost better fits the rest of the statement, as it's talking more about these collectives and peoples in the last part with the plural form. So they themselves are able to obtain the whole of Gaul with the three most powerful and also strongest peoples, rather than the kingship seized, because we know that Ergeterix is the one who's seizing the kingships and actually gaining power. So this provides the light onto the situation. And next comes some interesting events that are what eventually lead Caesar to be involved. And disposition is their plan is ready, but there's an anomaly that's going to occur. And all this double dealing and conspiring that Caesaris has done with these other people that we mentioned in the previous bit is going to progress the story, and we'll focus on that next time. So thanks, and hope this is helpful.